could I say one thing, Coach Thibault, before you start, is that I had a message from Shelly Sheets. She was very apologetic that she could not join today, but just wanted to give a shout out to you because she met you when she was at Loyola, Maryland.
That's right. I'll tell her hi for me.
All right. Well, with that, Colleen, thank you so much every week again for coming on, and your snack tips pretty good today. I'll give you that. They're getting healthier, I think.
They are,
which is good to see. But you always do such a great job.
This is what I'm eating.
I had some of those actually today too. But our next speaker is we're so lucky to have him. He started off as a practice player and graduate assistant, like a lot of male coaches in the game. Then became a VCU women's basketball assistant, and then moved on to the WNBA, where he was with the Connecticut Sun for their playoff run in 2012, and then joined the Mystics staff in 2013. In 7 seasons with the Mystics, Coach Thibault, they've only missed the playoffs one time, and of course, you all know about the 2019 WNBA championship, followed 1 week later by a wedding, from what I understand, which I can't even fathom how that even came to pass. I mean, I got married in May, and it was like I needed 3 months to prepare to do nothing. So with that, I'd like to toss it over to Coach Eric Thibault. Thank you for being on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. And, you know, a lot of people I see on this group that I know a little bit, and no, it's a very nice introduction. So I really appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's kind of like we were saying at the start. It's weird to just kind of be back into society here after a little bit of a crazy summer. But I don't know. Now it's over to a lot of you guys in the college world to kind of pick it up and see how it goes.
Now, did you stay? How long after your playoff game did you depart the bubble?
Not the next day, but the day after.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a day to pack up the moving pod and everything, and then we were out like early that following morning to get back.
Okay. Now, as a and I found this out listening to a podcast you were on, a fellow fan of analytics. So as a numbers guy, I'm sure no one follows me on Twitter, but I did a Twitter I did a deep dive down the rabbit hole on that last possession that you guys had, and possibly fouling up to with 5.8, I think, with 2 timeouts. You obviously you gave up the 3 to a player that wasn't a great shooter. So were there discussions in your coaching circles about fouling a 57.9% free throw shooter up to, or was that not on your radar?
Who was the 57% free throw shooter?
Kia.
Kia Vaughn.
Yeah, Kia Vaughn. And go ahead.
I think we may have even had a foul to give. To be honest, I haven't gone back and watched the last couple minutes of that game yet. Other than the night of, we might have even had a foul to give. I think our biggest worry was trying to foul, and you know, like Fred will know obviously, but trying to foul Diana or Skylar, who are both really smart, and if they see you trying to take the foul, could put you in just as bad a position as if you had played it out. Like, you know, I think you're saying with Kia, like we would have had to let her catch it and then try to foul her. Probably just harder or easier said than done maybe in that situation. It's just tough. Obviously you don't want to give up a 3 when you're up by 2. Watching it back, it was hard to find like a serious breakdown. You know, we thought about subbing. Leilani Mitchell's on the court at 5'5", but we kind of had the lineup out there that we trusted, that had been with us the whole year. We had rookies and non-great defensive players on the bench, which was tough. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like kind of one of those things, right? The player we let go mid-season, of course, makes the shot to beat us on a pretty good defensive rotation, and we made her double pump it, and she, you know, shot it with 0.4 or 0.5 on the clock. I don't know. It's not easy to live with him, but I guess you got to live with it.
If it makes you feel any better, my back of the napkin math made your decision was right by about 1.5%. So
okay. Good, thanks. I can't say I feel any better, but it's good to know that we're on the right side of that one.
Um, just rewinding a little bit. I'd like you to go through a little bit of your journey. Obviously, you come from a basketball family with your dad being the WNBA all-time winningest coach, but you earned your stripes kind of like everybody else. Practice player, graduate assistant. VCU. Can you talk a little bit about those? And I hear from the other podcast I listened to, you had an interest in journalism and you had explored that. So you want to talk about like the beginnings of your coaching and how you basically got on the path? Because everyone kind of wants to emulate a successful coach, like a professional coach like yourself. So if you could just talk about the first few years.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was an average player, high school player, didn't have a path going forward in that of any significance, and went to Missouri to be a journalism major, and realized a couple years in that I probably didn't want to continue with that I wanted to get into coaching. And I mean, right off the bat, I'm extremely fortunate to have grown up in a family where I had access to the game. I think later on down the road, it's nepotism. There's no way around. Like, my dad hires me in DC to be his assistant, but really, in my eyes, the huge advantage for me was just being around that from age 2 or 3, whenever I started just being around teams. So you get to see how those coaches act and how the players respond. I mean, even if you just take it from the WNBA part, I was able to be around Lindsay Whalen and Katie Douglas and Nikisha Sales and Taj McWilliams, Asia Jones, these smart players, and work with them as a 15, 16-year-old, in a limited capacity. But, that really shapes how you see the game and how you learn to communicate with players and how a coaching staff operates. I mean, that was such a huge advantage to me. By the time I went to go even be a practice player at Missouri, like you're saying, you put your dues in, and I went and played and practiced with them every day, and there wasn't money or huge reward for that. And even when I went to go ask to be a grad assistant, my last year, because I was graduating in the middle of the year, they had a full staff. One of their GAs that was supposed to leave didn't leave, and I only got a spot on staff when the video coordinator got pregnant. To be a GA at Missouri, they need somebody to help with the video. So that was my break. You just never know how it's going to go. And then my big break to get on staff, everybody got fired at the end of the season. So that was certainly a wild first year in the job. But as I later would tell my sister when she was starting out, I don't know if you guys know Carly, she's a few years younger than me. She's at Minnesota with Lindsay Whalen. You just kind of that GA job was so great because you just learned everything. As I'm sure some of you know, it was just the grunt work. It was getting bagels to throw in the freezer, to cleaning stuff out, to hand charting stuff for the coaches. It was like the crash course in college coaching, stuffing envelopes for recruiting mail outs. And I think that just really gave me I'd obviously seen how the sausage was made with my dad's staff and everything, but that gave me just another appreciation of, hey, this is how this operation runs. Like, you got to know all parts of it. You got to have appreciation for all parts of it. And then obviously that was like a tough end of the season. Everybody gets fired. Was promised a meeting with the new coaching staff, kind of got left out to dry, but I was fortunate to get on with St. John's, which was such a phenomenal experience for me. Kim Barnes-Arico was the head coach. Joe Tartamella, who's the head coach of St. John's now, was the assistant. Megan Duffy was on staff. Joy McCorvey, who has gone on to have a really great career as an assistant, was just starting out. So I was just extremely fortunate. Had a phenomenal staff, a bunch of head coaches on that team. A big city, totally different experience than Missouri or even Connecticut. So I felt really lucky to have a bunch of different experiences early on. By the time I was 22, 23. And when the VCU opportunity came, and then the opportunity to go back and work for my dad came, I felt really prepared of all the nuanced stuff, like the behind the scenes gritty work, whether it's putting edits together for coaches. I had some phenomenal coaches with my dad's staff. A lot of you probably know Bernadette Maddox, who just let me, Bernadette, who had no reason to let me do anything. She had under control. She didn't need my help. She's like, E, you got the personnel edits for the guards. So I make the edit, present them to the players. Like, you got Carol Lawson listening to me give like, what's Carol Lawson going to learn from me in a personnel edit? But it just showed you, if you were prepared and you had your stuff together and you could help, that those players would respect what you had to say and they could have a conversation with you about it. And that was just, I don't know, I was 22 years old, probably 23. Fred, when we had those battles when you were down in Atlanta, those playoff runs there. And, you know, that was just an unbelievable learning experience for me. By the time I became an assistant, I just had those kind of blocks built up behind me that I felt comfortable even at 25 when my dad hired me here, of being able to just hit the ground running. Sorry, that was a long-winded backstory, but I just had a lot of coaches just really give me an opportunity and get to learn a lot from in a short amount of time.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And I, looking through seeing that the list of guards that you've worked with, I know you focus on your player development on the guards. I mean, like you mentioned, Lindsay Whalen, Kara Lawson, Ivory Lotta, Christy Tolliver, I mean, Natasha Cloud, Ariel Atkins. You started working out guards when you were like 15, 16, and then you kind of just, you're putting a drop in the bucket of trust every time you're out there on the court with them. And then you build up that trust with those players. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say, like, it was a little bit different relationship with each one, just because I was at different points. Lindsay was like a family member. That was like my older sister. We were probably working out together. I was still playing in high school and stuff. Kara was like, I always joke, like, you facilitate Kara's workouts. You're not working Kara out. Kara knows what Kara wants to do. You're facilitating her workouts. But that was great. I mean, she was the best, is just sitting and talking through situations in the game and seeing how she would do it. My big test was probably Ivory. We got to DC. Ivory was our big free agent signing to kind of turn our team around, and she was amazing day one of letting me coach her. She had a purpose. She wanted to get better. She hadn't made an all-star team, that stuff yet. She had been on the right track. And that's where I had to learn. I had to come up with a plan, figure out how I was going to present to her of, here's the ways I can help you, and then just stay consistent. And luckily we had more success than people expected that first year. And I think that bought me a lot of trust with her. The current group, Tosh, has been quite the journey from where she started out. You guys see Tasha's personality plenty, so you can imagine there were some days along the way that were bumpier, but just that, we've been lucky to have players that just have a huge desire to improve. And I don't think that any coach can do a whole lot unless you have players that are wired that way. On the other end of the spectrum, Ariel Atkins is the easiest player to coach that we've ever had. Like, you tell her to do something and you're Texas girl. You tell her to, you give her something to work on and she works on it and she comes back to you. It's like, okay, what's next? So I don't know. I think that's part of the secret, right? Is like trying to figure out where does each one need you to, fill in the gaps for them, supplement for them. Some need a kick in the ass and some need, hey, just think about this, get this situation. And you just got to know, which each of those players needs.
Now, how much are you able to, I know your training camp is always affected by the overseas seasons and it can be really short in some cases. How much are you able to work with the players leading into your first game, and then obviously your development continues right on into the season? It just gets smaller and smaller. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say it's different every year. We've been pretty lucky in DC to have a few players who live in the area in the off season that haven't gone overseas. Like Elena has never gone overseas. She spends at least a chunk of time here. Now, at some point she's been rehabbing. Same's been for Tiana Hawkins. Sometimes she's been rehabbing. We had Tiara Ruffin Pratt for a bunch of years that was here in the off season. Tosh has been around. So some players you really get to get into the weeds a little bit with and get some extended time. But yeah, a lot of players we're lucky if we get them. We're lucky if we get them on time for camp, but we're lucky, ideally we get some of them in here a week before training camp, and you just try to simplify your plan and go. We've incorporated what a lot of other teams have done of kind of the daily vitamin concept of workouts, trying to build some individual work into practice time, pre-practice, post-practice. But yeah, I mean, I would say that's one of the single biggest challenges in our league is how do you get player development done while you're in a short, quick season trying to win games.
Talking to some other coaches, it seems to be the general consensus that the off season is for improving your weaknesses, and then during the season you're reinforcing the strengths. Would you say that that's kind of consistent with your model?
Yeah, I would say by and large, yes. I think you maybe have to get creative in terms of how you attack weaknesses, especially if it's a player that's playing big minutes. If you've got like this summer, you mentioned Ariel Atkins as an example, who's playing 30 minutes a game, playing every other day, that had some stuff that we needed to work on, particularly defensive footwork, getting over picks. So it might not be that you can do it live for 20 minutes. It might be, hey, we're going to watch this film. Can you visualize it yet? Okay, now we're going to go on the floor. We're going to grab you and one of the rookies, and we're going to just work on it for 5 minutes after practice. And we're just going to try to get a rep in here. Maybe even it's in the pregame. We do an individual pregame warm-up. Maybe we're just going to throw a couple reps in as a reminder of one or two things that we need to work on. So you may not be making huge strides, but you can do, I don't know, we think of it maybe more as maintenance during the season, trying to keep up on a couple of those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Appreciate it. And by all means, everyone, I don't mean to be dominating all the questions. I was just had a few things jotted down that I wanted to ask about, but if anyone else has questions for Coach, feel free to ask away.
Hey, E.T., I got a question. Thanks for doing this, by the way. Appreciate
What's up, buddy?
Man. Hey, you talked about film. I wanted to ask you how much film is being watched in the off season and with the players, or do you guys kind of give them an assignment and they watch it themselves, or how much one-on-one time are you guys really sitting down? I know the NBA, they're pretty heavy on that too, just sitting down watching film and all, but your level and what you've been doing too, just can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, our ones that are here, we try to do pretty regularly. Like Elena and Tiana, who are pretty tight, we tried to watch at least weekly with them. And some weeks it was film of them, and some weeks it was we'd pick an NBA player or a WNBA player or something, and maybe that played their position, that we'd sit down and watch some stuff of, especially if we could tie it to our workouts that we were doing on the court. Our ones that are overseas are a little bit more of a challenge. Just it's a tough balance between staying in their ear and staying connected with them, and also understanding that they have a season to play and expectations on them a lot of the times to carry their teams that are over there. So we've tried to put together some more team videos, like especially during the kind of hiatus before we got to the bubble. We tried to do some team teaching tapes of our defensive principles, and maybe like even before we got into our play sets, but just kind of our offensive principles that we would send out to the group. It's gotten easier to share video and stuff with services like Huddle and Synergy, obviously. And some of it's directed by the players. Players will come to, hey, can I watch some more of these point guards who I like watching? Can you put some stuff together? So I don't know. Again, it's probably case by case, as our off seasons tend to be different pieces, different places. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I'll ask another one. Sorry, go up here.
You can go. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask ET about the whole transition about in the women's game. A lot of college students going to the WNBA and then transition from the WNBA if they're going overseas and coming back. You talked briefly about it, but can you explain or talk about how, if it is difficult for you to transition their style of play, if they're playing a certain way overseas and they come back to y'all and you guys have a short time frame of trying to change their habits or so, if you want to call it. Can you talk briefly about that and how y'all go about doing it?
I'll tell you what I think is the toughest situation for us is when we have somebody who's maybe a role player for us, and I'll give an example in a second, but somebody who goes overseas and they got to score 20 a game, and they come back for us and they need to get 5 rebounds and they need to defend and they need to shoot when they're open, but we're not playing through them. That's a real tough one for some players. Some players it comes easy to, or they're good enough to just be the same. But we had Maisha Hines-Allen, who had a hell of a summer for us, that was part of her struggle. Her second year here was she went to Korea, had to carry a huge load for her team, and came back. And it's like, hey, no, we need you to defend, not foul, block out, run the floor, and make sure that when you're in the game with, Christy and Ariel, that you're setting drag screens and rolling to the rim. We're not throwing it in the post to you 20 times. Now, the irony, of course, being that this summer we actually needed her to carry the load for us. But I think that's tough. It's hard, especially for young players who a lot of the time are still trying to figure out their own game. And they're being asked to do different things, different places. We'll see next year. We'll have a couple that'll come in, like Shug Sutton from Texas, or Stella Johnson, who probably will have to do a little bit more offensively for their teams over there. But that's kind of where you just have to, we try to have an exit interview and stay in contact. And I think clarity just about what our expectations are really helps. If they can't go in, oh, well, I don't understand my role, I don't know what well, no, you should. I mean, we've had discussions and you've had time to ask, and if you don't know, you can come ask. So I don't know, that it crops up every now and then, but luckily we've had a pretty good group.
Yeah, that's big. Understanding your role is big. So thank you so much for the answer. Yeah.
Go ahead, Pierre, if you've got a question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I know you mentioned earlier about your the daily vitamins, and that's something I've heard recently as well. Kind of wanted you to elaborate on that. Is that something the whole team is doing? Every position, or is that something split up? Broken down between position groups, or what?
Yeah, we've evolved it a little bit. I mean, it's almost a little bit different every year. When we first started it, and we, like a lot of people, we stole it from the Spurs. We literally had time slots. Like if we had practice at 11:30, we would start at 10. And Marianne Stanley might have a post player at one end. I'd have a guard, or maybe two guards if they were young. And we'd every 20 minutes, we'd just rotate it. And they might go lift, or they might go get treatment or whatever when it wasn't their time on the court. And it was really structured. We've gotten away from that a little bit. We've started putting some guards and bigs together, where we'd call it like a group vitamin. Like we have a couple guards, couple posts, so we could work on some two-man action. And it kind of evolved. I don't know if it had to do with us getting our new facility last year where we had more space, but it kind of evolved into people just got their routines. Like the ones that needed it before practice were getting it, some wanted to shoot after. But I thought it really helped us those first couple of years, just kind of restructure. Hey, you need to get this time in. We're not going to kill you. It's not a workout, really. It can be a little bit, but it's your skill work. Hey, you're struggling with your finishing. Well, you're going to get maybe 5 layups over the course of practice. 6 if we're not doing a finishing drill. So let's get some work in that's tailored to you. I thought we got great buy-in from our players on that. So I don't know. I think we just took the attitude that we weren't going to get set in stone on anything. We wanted to structure it right off the bat, and then we were like, let's loosen it up a little bit. Let's mix the combos. And I think we kind of rolled with how they were feeling about it.
Appreciate that.
Yep. So you're getting player input on those plans, the daily vitamin plans.
Yeah, I think if the overall player development thing, we've tried to get individual sort of development profiles with each player. Coaches will meet and kind of we really try to narrow it down. What are 2 or 3 things we're working on? Because otherwise, somebody's got the idea this day. Hey, they need to do this. They need to do that. Coach T, my dad's say, well, they need to do. So if he goes, hey, she needs to work on that. That's on the list, because there's no point in us doing all this stuff. And then he's going, well, why the hell aren't you doing this thing I've said 3 times? So we try to get down to a list. We go to the player. We kind of have them do a self eval, usually at the start of the year. And then we just kind of come up with a short list. Hey, here's the things we're gonna work on. We're gonna use our pre-practice time. They always want to make players always, I want to get my shots up. I just need to get my rhythm. Okay, that's great. But when we're on this little bit of time, this is what we can't lose sight of these couple things. And for some of them, it might not even be a skill thing. It might be, hey, I know I got to do my activation stuff, because if I don't, my hip's going to flare up. Like it might not always be 3 skill things for us. It might be 1 or 2 skill things and a nutrition thing, or a physical maintenance thing, or watching film, making sure that Maisha goes and watches with Asia Jones. So we try to have a short list. That way there's a lot of clarity. There's not a lot of disconnect between players and staff.
And Mike, to add on to what you're saying about the vitamins and everything, I can echo the same thing I've done for years myself. But the big thing is the super vitamins. The super vitamins is when your players do things on their off day and go in the gym and make it happen. And
Nice, I like that.
Yeah, those are the players, man, that get it done for you. And I thought, you guys have done that, your dad and stuff, and with teams he's had, and you can just see it where players have really have gotten better each year and have really improved. You guys have done a great job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we've I think the most challenging ones are always those ones that aren't playing. They can go either way. Like 9, on our roster, 9, 10, 11, they can go either way. They can be unhappy and not want to do that extra stuff. But we've been lucky that we've had a couple who were really willing to work. We tried to make it more game-like. Everybody does some version of it, right? You don't play X number of minutes. You got to get a little workout in. A lot of times it's just cardio or whatever. We tried to start just figuring out a way to play a little bit 2-on-2, 3-on-3 to keep some sharpness. Like Coach is saying, on those off days, especially. Because those are the ones that right when you need them is being right when they're going to check out, right? Or they're just going to be a little bit frustrated. That's going to be the week you need them.
Now, Coach, being in the professional ranks now for 7 years, what are you doing in the off season? I know you have some players that are around that you're still working out, but what types of things are you doing to stay sharp, to stay connected to the game, to keep learning and growing in those months where you're not with the team?
I've been extremely fortunate, obviously, with us having the Wizards in-house and now the G League team as well, the Capital City Go-Go. And they've been nothing but open with us since we've been here. So I've been really lucky to be able to sit in on practices. This year I got to help out with the Go-Go a little bit, be on the court with them, sit in their coaches' meetings. And then a great thing that we get, we basically get paid, scouting trips to go see all these college players for the draft, but you get to go watch all these practices. Nothing better than going to see UConn and Notre Dame and Stanford and all these teams practice in the off season under the guise of going to see a couple of their players. But, you come back from that with so many new ideas and sometimes old ideas that you kind of forget. Like you go watch Tara Vanderveer's practice and you're like, they're doing the simplest things, skill work to start your practice. You're like, why don't we just come back to this? It's the easiest thing. So that triggers a lot of the time some of our discussions as a staff. We're all going out to different places to scout, and then obviously there's stuff like podcasts and books and all that, but nothing like getting a free chance to drop into somebody's practice. I feel like you always gives you a different perspective. There's so many different ways you can be successful. And that's, I don't know, probably one of the biggest perks of our job, I would say.
That's awesome. Just great. Coaches, other questions?
Yeah. Hey, Eric, how are you?
Helen, how are you?
I'm doing well. So yeah, I got a question in regards to, since y'all were playing like basically every other day, in regards to like players' minutes and just like, managing their time on the floor, like how much do y'all talk about it in the pre-practice, or like, how did y'all navigate all of that, especially like near the end of the season where, especially y'all were kind of on that bubble between like 8th spots, and you like really need your players out there, but also like making sure that they don't get hurt for overdoing it.
This year was a real challenge, I won't lie. We've been really lucky, and I think a thing that in the last couple of years I've really come to appreciate is the sports science part of it. We have a strength coach, and we get to lean on the Wizards a little bit also for so much more of the data around, and load management's like the hot term, right? But a lot of it's just trying to get a feel for where your players are physically at any time, even compared to themselves, like how are they today as opposed to how ready and physically strong were they 2 weeks ago. So we luckily had a little bit of that to go on. The hardest part is when we were right in the middle of the season. We're in the longest stretch. I think we played 10 games in 18 days or something like that. And we weren't playing well. It was kind of when we hit our roster had turned over and our players are like a couple of our vets are going like, hey, we need to practice. We hadn't been doing much live. And they're like, we need to get a rhythm. But then we do that a couple days and then we got no legs. You know, it was a real kind of catch-22. And we have these new players who we need to get involved in our system. I don't know that we came up with a good answer, to be honest with you. It was a bit of a struggle, and then we got a couple days off, and everybody kind of got a second wind, and we played well the last 7-8 games of the year. But I think just trying to be smart about not the kind of the compromise we came up with. Hey, we're gonna practice, but it's gonna be some individual stuff, and we might go 10 or 15 minutes of like real practice. Like we're playing Phoenix tomorrow night. We might not go through all Phoenix's sets, but we're going to go 4-on-4 through some concepts that we know we're going to have to face tomorrow night. Like a shell defense, but it's just going to be tailored a little bit to what we might see. And then we might go through a couple of our things live and get out. Like that's it. We just couldn't do much more. And like you're saying, we needed people to play big minutes. Like it didn't do us any good to make sure we had Maisha Hines-Allen figured out one more pick and roll coverage, and then then she's on the shelf for 3 games. We were toast. Like that was it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Coach?
I'm curious to hear a couple of the college coaches on this call. How are you guys handling this period of time? Because man, this is a big long window before any games. How are you guys keeping it fresh, I guess, more than anything?
Hey, this is Ebony Halliburton. I'm with K-State women's basketball. One of the assistant coaches. Hey, thanks for your time. This is awesome. Matt's doing a great job. And Matt, I'm going to follow you after this call. So it's a lot of people following you. But Coach, we're doing pretty good. We've been able to, for 8 weeks, be COVID free. So we kind of created like our own little bubble, and we're practicing, but the girls actually have to practice with masks, the whole practice, and condition with masks. And so our men's team are doing open gym without masks. So we're just waiting for that okay to be able to take off the mask. So the girls are frustrated because, they can't really breathe, but we've been safe for about 8 weeks. So that's been fortunate. But yeah, it's going great. We are first game November 25th. So scheduling games has been very tough because
right.
because we every team that we play has to have 3 COVID tests before we play them, and so the funds have to be in place for that. But the question I had for you, Coach, is with your dad been a coach, and when you first came into the league and you're coaching elite players, how did you handle? Did you ever get any bad feedback from players when you went to train them and they really didn't want you to train them because they thought, oh, he's the coach's son, or he doesn't really know what he's doing? How would you handle that?
Well, I'll say I feel like if players felt that way, I didn't know about it. I didn't have players express that concern to me. Something I worried about when I took the job, to be frank. Like I worried about that exact situation. I think I just tried to show that I could help them, and that, when it was my scout, I was prepared, and that I wasn't, maybe your average 25-year-old wouldn't get that job, but I had the job and I was going to be good at it. You know what I mean? Like it's what it was. And I think just like trying to be honest with them, even when we were having discussions about their game, it's tough because I've never had the player come really just straight out and say like they're concerned. I'm sure it was there at times. I'm sure there's been players who worried about that, but I think, we kind of let them know that, hey, you can voice a concern to me if there's a concern. Like his door's open too. Like you can take your concern right to him. I might give you guidance like, hey, like, he's really getting on me. I'm having a hard time with it. Okay, here's how I would, here's how you might want to hear it or approach it or whatever. But if this is really affecting you, go talk to him.
Right.
You don't need me to go tell him. Like you go tell him. He got an open door policy. So I would say that was probably the easiest way to handle it. I don't think I've had pushback from players of like not wanting to have me work with them or stuff like that. But
Okay.
I'm sure at times, like maybe they won't say something to me that they would say to another assistant. I don't know. That might just be something I gotta just accept. There's other people on staff. We try to have a rounded staff so that players feel like they got more than one option to go talk to somebody. I would say that's probably the way we've approached it.
Thank you.
Yeah. God knows what they're saying behind my back, but can't do
No,
much.
they probably love you.
Oh, and I gotta bust him every now and then, right? Like that's the other thing too. They gotta see that like they can have a relationship with me other than him. Like, he's got enough quirks that I can bust him a little bit with the players.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Got to.
Thank you.
He deserves it.
Yeah.
Coach, of all your duties that you've had in this, let's say now, so like in the season, of all your duties, what's the one thing you really look forward to the most? Like you don't mind doing it, you just can't wait to do it. What's your favorite thing, your aspect of your job?
Two come to mind. I mean, I always say the player development. Like there's no replacement for like being able to get on the court with a player and help them improve. Like that's whether it's the 12th man on the roster or like, Elena, who I work with Elena, I go, Elena, you're going to score 20 a game. Like I'm not affecting that one way or the other. Like that's just going to happen. But trying to find a different angle for somebody like that. Second part, and there's just like nothing like having a game plan, especially late in the season for like great players and great coaches on the other end. Like just, we're in the finals last year, like trying to prep for Kurt Miller, who's got 48 options off of every one of their sets. And we'll run them all over the course of a series. Trying to figure out how to solve like unsolvable problem. Like nobody has, how do you guard Brianna Stewart? There's no solution to guarding Brianna Stewart or Sue Bird. There's no coverage you can run in a pick and roll that Sue Bird hasn't seen or can't beat. But how do you disguise it, in a game? How do you create something that she can't? Maybe it takes her a couple positions. Like that aspect of game planning is really, really just like, especially satisfying when it goes well and really frustrating when it doesn't. A couple of years ago, we came up with a great game plan for Connecticut to take away Alyssa Thomas's roles, and Jasmine Thomas and Courtney Williams came out and made 6 threes in the first quarter. This was after an off season of thinking about it, and I was like, you know what, not gonna do that. I'm not gonna approach that off season that way again. We'll discuss it in a couple days leading up to the game. No, that one, yeah, you remember those ones.
Hey, Eric, I got another question. In regards, especially, I guess let's talk about like last year, y'all won the finals, won the championship. Really want to focus on Natasha. I think she's a great point guard. But and then like you said, she has a really outgoing personality. But she was still, I guess, on her rookie contract, right? Like she was still like maybe third year. Is that what it was?
No, she was off her rookie contract. She had signed like her restricted free agent contract or whatever.
Okay.
It was like her first contract after that. Yeah.
Okay. But like she's also playing with like Elena and Christy, who were both like veterans, and I mean you could kind of say like the captains per se of the team. But how does she, from your perspective as a coach, how did you see her develop as into that vocal leader? How she kind of like, when you watch the game, like on the sideline, like she's the one who's kind of like really bringing the team, I don't know, the personality of the team out. Just like your perspective of her as she grew, like, can you talk about that? Because to me, it's amazing, like how well of a point guard she is, both like on the court playing, but also vocally too.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of the things we loved about her when we drafted her, is that she wasn't afraid to be vocal. I mean, we watched her in a shoot around her senior year, basically like coach her teammates through the shoot around. You don't see that with too many college kids that were just like that locked in. She, naturally knew how to run a team. I would say the biggest challenge for Tosh was, and you see this sometimes with kids that like want to be leaders, but maybe don't have their own house totally in order. And she would always play hard. Like that was never an issue. But I think once she made the leaps in terms of like her pro habits, how she got her body ready, how she, handled her business like off the court and walked in like focused. Once she got all that, those veteran teammates had a lot of respect for her. Elena and Christy really grew as leaders. They're not naturally loud people, so they were fine with somebody that was going to be really vocal and loud, but they wanted to be authentic. Like you don't want somebody just loud for the sake of being loud. So I would say once she like just kind of got her pro habits, like you're saying, she was young still. She was young when we traded for Elena. She was like her third year, I think, or fourth year. But once she got it together and once she made big improvements skill-wise in her game where they could trust her to make big plays, I think that made her being vocal a lot easier. Like, it wasn't like you didn't have anybody going like, yeah, she's saying all that, but she can't even, like get here on time or whatever. She wasn't really a problem like that, but you know what I'm saying? Like it was just an authenticity to her. Like they knew she meant what she said and she could back it up.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to get in before we finish, and I know other coaches probably have other questions, but I did want to just ask Coach, what are your future aspirations? Where would you like to go in your coaching career? Would you ever consider coaching in college? Just out of curiosity.
I think right now I'd like to stay in the pro game. I think there's going to be a chance, we'll see how much longer my dad coaches. He keeps saying like 1 year, but I got a feeling he's got a while left in him. I don't know what he'd do with himself. I think there's a chance, you never know, right? The bottom could fall out in DC or whatever, but I think there's going to be a chance at some point for me to be the head coach here. Had a couple opportunities to go some other places and I just really like the environment we have here. The team we have and working for him is great. Our staff's great. So I like the pro game. I don't really want to go back and deal with all the recruiting that some of you guys have to deal with. That's just that's a crazy world. So I don't know. Women's side, men's side, I'm not quite sure. But I always kind of say like, we'll just take it a year at a time. So much can change. You got to have some goals and stuff, but as soon as you stop thinking about the job that you got in front of you, it's tough. You get off course pretty quick, or at least I do.
Hey, Eric, I call the college coaches great lawyers because they got to document everything they do, man. Back in the day, I didn't have to do that. I can sit in the gym, like I said before, for days and watch players. But now,
I feel like it's different jobs. You guys getting like paid to do like 2 or 3 different jobs. You got to be a salesman and then you got to be a coach. Oh man. Yeah.
That's tough.
And yet you want to make sure you get those players, right? You don't want to rely on somebody else to pick your players for you.
I was telling them one time that a couple of weeks ago that the difference with college players and pro players is that, and I think somebody gave you a question about a player and I really want to work with a coach or something like that. And my answer would be, well, look like I need to find you another team. Because eventually whatever that player is doing on their own, if it's not working with you, then it's time for you, to put them out on a journey somewhere where you can get something from her. A little bit in college, you got to kind of, work with them and nurture them some, but in the pros, it's pretty much cut and dry. You're either going to do it or you're not.
And it's hard to think of it being a luxury of taking over a 5-29 team when we got here to DC, but that was kind of like, hey, this is what the record was before we got here. We're at least going on the up. Like
that sounded like my Tulsa team. That when I took over the Tulsa team, I was like, hey, if you don't want to be here, you can go. I don't care who you are.
We can lose without you just as easily as lose with you. Yeah. So I mean, there's always a couple of those, but that's like everything, right? Player recruitment, drafting, trade for. You got to know who you're getting. You got to believe in them, and then you can't make you might make a mistake, or you can't make too many mistakes on players, on the quality of person you're bringing in.
That's true.
Hey, Eric. So, quick question. Sorry, Matthew. So all these recruits that, you talk about recruiting, we're sitting there talking to recruits and they always say, hey, what's your aspirations after you graduate? I want to go pro, I want to go pro. Obviously it matters on systems, character, what position you're looking for, but what are a few things, maybe the non-negotiables that you can, you and even Coach Williams, but non-negotiables that y'all as a WNBA coach can say, hey, look, this is what you really need for you to be a pro, because these kids don't really understand what it takes to be a pro. they say, you've seen it firsthand with some, some of our players and the others before, but they say they want to go pro, but there's a fine line between being pro and non-pro.
Yeah, I mean, first thing, right? Like, do you play hard all the time? I mean, it's just, it's amazing. Fred can tell you the same thing, but like, we'll go to the combine at the Final Four, and it's all the kid. Maybe you get a couple third-round picks at that combine. Maybe I see some of those kids play harder at that combine in one day than you do when you go watch them practice during the college season, because they feel the desperation. All of a sudden, the realities hit them of like, oh, okay, this is ending if I don't like figure it out. So I don't know. I would say just the level. That's why we try to go watch practices when we scout. Like, do they bring it every day? Do they try to be the best, especially in a college team? Do you try to be the best player in the gym every day? Do you carry yourself the same way? Can your coaches and teammates rely on you? I mean, that stuff, I would say, if you can answer those questions, that's half the battle. And then it's just a matter of talent. Also, it's amazing, like Steven, I won't name names, but like with a couple of the players that have been at Georgetown, good players, I'll get questions from family or whatever in the stands, like, hey, you going to draft? I'm like, they're shooting 38% in college, right? Like in the big, like how are you going to suddenly shoot 45% from the field in the pros? You're going to miss layups or you're missing open threes. Like, it doesn't get easier. So I don't know. Sometimes it's like they need a reality check, right? Like, here's your stats. It's the simplest way, right? Here's your numbers, and here's the average shooting guard or whatever in the WNBA, and here were their numbers in college. Those numbers usually come down a little bit, not the other way around. So I don't know. I mean, if you're not trying to be the best player on your team, if you're not trying to be the best player in your league, 15 players roughly on average make the league every year. 15 new players, 20 maybe on a good year. Like, that gets real tight real fast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You can always bend that to your advantage too, right? Like, they ask you that question, then you're trying to coach them and they don't want to hear it. It's like, well, I thought you were trying to be a pro. Like, I thought you were trying to make it.
Yeah, you got to put it back at them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they say that's their why and all that too. And if that's what they really want, and I get it. I think players, that recruit, you go in, you think you want this, and then you find out that you don't really want it because you don't want to work that hard to get it. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of sacrifice that needs to take place, and their priorities might be other things, and maybe it's TikToking or I don't know, but there's sure is a lot of distractions. So
I would say maybe something that would help at times too is finding a realistic comparison in the pros. Like, their favorite player might be Taurasi, but Taurasi's not the realistic comparison. It might be somebody's backup point guard who made the league by pressuring the ball and, making good reads on the pick and roll. You know what I mean? It might not be, a lot of times it's not the star players who's a comparison, especially if you're not at, one of those big couple schools. If you're not a post player at Baylor or, shooting guard at UConn, it might be somebody else that's your realistic example.
That's a good answer. I like that one a lot. Yeah.
Hey, Coach, this is Jason Pruitt. I coach at the University of Laverne out here, Division III. I got a question when it comes to like recruiting and scouting when it comes to the pro. Like, how much do you all have scouts that just go out and scout, or do you all scout your own talent for the draft? And like, how much actually goes into that from the head coach down to the staff? Or do you all just leave it to the scouts to bring you players and then you do your homework?
That's a great question, Jason. One of the luxuries, at least in normal year for us, is that our season doesn't overlap, right? So we're actually able to do most of our scouting for the draft ourselves. Like we'll go out, we'll kind of make a schedule as a staff, head coach and assistants, and even some other people on our staff. And we'll try to go see games on our own. Now if we can save ourselves a trip by, or not even save a trip, but we know a college coach in a conference and we can ask them about some of these players they've played against. That maybe helps us get our list whittled down a little bit off the bat. But once we kind of get locked into our main list of players, we're trying to go see them. We're trying to see them practice. We'll try to see big games, non-conference, anybody that's coming through the DC area. We're lucky that we got a lot of teams, a lot of colleges nearby that we're able to scout games and maybe see some people that are on the West Coast or whatever. And then we'll pick a college tournament or two and try to go see them. But yeah, we're able to do most of it ourselves. Overseas, you kind of lean maybe on some agents, a couple of pro coaches you might know over there. That's a little bit more difficult. Our players a lot of the time are our best scouts overseas. They play with these players. They know who can play, especially ones that have been around for a few years. Maybe not the young ones for the draft, but if you're trying to sign like a veteran free agent from overseas, our players are really good scouts in that regard.
Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Coaches, any other questions for Coach Thibault? We're right at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I got a scouting question, like game planning. With COVID, all the scheduling changes and things like that for colleges this year, we may have to play certain teams in our conference back to back, like on back to back, days. And
Sure.
so I was curious to know, like, how do you all adjust from game to game, or is there like a mindset going in where you're like, we're going to run these certain sets or actions, and we're going to save certain ones for the next game that they're not going to see this game? Like, how far are y'all thinking ahead?
I would say normally we're probably not trying to save too much. We're trying to win the game that's in front of us. Now, I will say, like last year when we were pretty loaded and we could really score, we probably hung on to a few things till later in the season. But in terms of like, maybe we're like the situation you're talking about, we're playing somebody home and home, or we're playing a playoff series. We're probably not sitting on too much. Maybe we'll sit on a tweak or an adjustment. We would rather just play, try to win that game. And then maybe the next day at practice, we're going to go, hey, we showed them this last night. This will be our counter tomorrow. I think a reporter asked my dad that this year we were playing Phoenix twice in a week, and it was like, are you guys going to save anything? We're like, no, we need any win we can get. We gotta use up all the bullets in the gun tonight, because we got to use them all. I do like, though, if you're going to play a team a couple times, trying to put a little doubt in their minds about either their favorite play, or if a team likes to trap a certain situation, or they're going to try to switch, like try to put some doubt in their mind right off the bat about what you think their biggest game. Like, we play teams that we know are going to switch. And, Fred knows he's got the same he's got Candace and NECA and those. Okay, you're going to switch on NECA. We're going to punish that switch the first time, so that at your first time out, you're standing there thinking, can we keep switching that pair? Like, you want to switch on Elena, that's fine. We're going to try to get a mismatch that first play and see, hey, you really going to stick with that? You really going to stick with that switch? You better send a double. So I don't know. I would say we approach it that way sometimes. Like, hey, especially if you played them twice, like they did this all game in the first game. Okay, we're going to pick on that right away to start the second game and see if you're going to, stick or twist, basically.
Yeah, and Pierre, main thing is it really evolves around that first quarter. You try to throw a lot of wrinkles in early to make, whatever that team has been working on for the past, 2 or 3 days. That first quarter, you want to put in some things differently, where players are looking over to the bench going, I didn't remember that, So then by the second and third quarter, they then forgot all about the last few practices that you had. So the first quarter, and I learned that looking at the pros with the Lakers and the Clippers and the Bucks. That's what a lot of the pro teams do. They kind of do some wrinkles early in the game to see if it works or don't work, and throw the opposition off. And I would say, from my analytics guy, he let us know, and it usually works about 75% of the time, you know, either with a close victory or a win.
Yeah, Fred's right. There's nothing
Thanks.
worse than your players looking at the bench like, are we really? Is this really what we're gonna do?
Really?
You're in a bad spot right then.
Phenomenal insight, coaches. I mean, we're so lucky to have Coach Thibault, and then we have an all-star list of people coming on to talk basketball. So I can't thank you enough. This has been fabulous. If there's any other questions, coaches, now's the time. If not, we'll let Coach Thibault go be with his family. And man, thank you so much for being on today. And can't thank you enough. This was outstanding. And
Thanks so
hopefully,
much for having me. I hope you invite me back to listen to. I kind of saw after the fact, after I was invited, I saw some of the speakers, and I know I'm not as entertaining as Lynn Dunn, but I appreciate you having me
You're
on.
good, man. You're good. You did a great job, man. You're good. You're natural.
Great job.
We've been crazy lucky, and today's no exception, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you very much.
appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.